Liege, Liege, baby. Liege, Liege, baby. All right, stop. Let's talk Colab and listen. Liege is back with a brand new game proposition. The game grabs a hold of dice tightly, placing them workers back and forth so rightly. Will they ever stop? Yo, I don't know. Turn on the power and glow. From all these monsters in their mantle, light up the towers like a Frankenstein handle. I do what I can. Whoever said white guys can't jump? Sup, Liege Games. We're obviously talking about Colab today. Crowdfunding right now from Portal Games. So, let's talk about it for a second. 5 things you should know about this worker placement, dice worker placement game, as mentioned very clearly in my opening rap. You guys were hoping for a different opening. Well, there you got it. And is it right for you? Who's it right for? Who's going to like it? Who's not going to like it? And what do you need to know about it to help you decide whether or not it should be a game you should be interested in? Let's do this. Now, in case you're not aware of what Colab is, you are a mad scientist in this tower with your little minions, and you are essentially Victor Frankenstein making your various creatures, but also putting together gadgets and using all of the combination of those to make a tableau of a certain number of cards to combo to score victory points. Intrigued? Okay, let's talk for a second. As I mentioned, dice worker placement. And if you know anything about me, like, I am not a big worker placement fan. So, I was intrigued. Portal Games was willing to send it. Okay, let's talk about it. Dice worker placement as a mad scientist with Tableau. First thing that stands out is, like I said, it's dice. Dice worker placement. Do you like worker placement? Do you like dice? You are obviously rolling dice, and they fit nicely in the top of your workers. So the top symbol showing is the resource that's allocated to the 2 labs that it touches. And everyone's going to be putting their workers out on those areas and jumping them around, essentially. So the first thing is, are you okay with dice? Are you okay with rolling these dice and getting one of the various resources on the sides? Different colors, different allocations of symbols on the sides. Simple enough, right? Now, combine that with the deck of cards that you were drawing from, of the 3 different things that you are essentially building, if you will, to put on your tableau. Because there's deck drawing. You're randomly drawing cards from your deck. Now, again, just like with these little guys, I kind of chose the yellow ones because they remind me of Minions, and my kids love Minions, so I've seen all the movies multiple times. That there is some randomness there. The cards that you're going to get are not going to be equal. They are sometimes going to determine what your engine is going to look like. So it's not as simple as, well, I'm going to go this route. No, you're going to have to base that off of what is given to you from this thick sack of cards of each of the 3 areas. Are you okay with that? The hand size is a way that this game utilizes a mitigation tactic in order to not limit what you can get. And the cards are very plentiful. You can get cards and then discard cards that you don't want to try and build because it's too difficult. Or it doesn't line up with what your resources are that you've rolled, that you're putting out on your minions, or the minions that are out on the towers in the first place. Which, as a mechanic here, for just a side note, I've never seen this done before mechanically in that sense. Now, again, obviously not the big worker placement person, but it's unique because essentially the vast majority of this game is taking a worker off and then putting said worker back on with a different die. Rinsing and repeating back and forth. You always have to have at least 2, if not all 3 of your minions on the board. There's only one thing that happens if you cannot put one of those guys back on. If you don't have enough dice available, then your guy goes and rests in the center, and, then that's a whole separate issue in action. But essentially, that leads me into the second point, as I rambled here a little bit too long in the first point, that the gameplay mechanisms are relatively straightforward. As a non-worker placement person, I was not overwhelmed. I was not discouraged. I did not have an inability to understand this. And so it was easy to set up. It was easy to get to the table. It was easy to play. Very so. Very much so. No qualms from that side of things. I mean, I think nowadays, especially with deluxe versions or some of these games, you have a combination of 240 tokens and 16 different decks that you're setting up and 7 different sideboards. No, no. This is simple. It's straightforward. It's very, very easy to get to the table without any overhead issues. Another aspect, as the next point, are the victory conditions. Or not really victory conditions, but objectives that you have the ability to fulfill during the game. And as you can see on these cards, probably not well, there is a choice at the top and there is a choice at the bottom. And for example, the choice on the top on the one I'm holding in this hand, not this hand, see, sleight of hand, magic trick here. When another scientist figure moves into the same lab as yours, gain a victory point. It's worth 5 at the end. Or the end game one, because that's an ongoing in the first part, 4 victory points for every card with at least 3 open sides on your grid. So, how do you choose to do these? Because they are all like that, where the top one is ongoing and the bottom one is endgame. And, do you go high risk, high reward? Do you go the more certain turtle, slow and steady wins the race approach? Because you get 2 of these, and they make a difference. So how you want to play the game can be drastically different just with a simple twist of these cards. Which, again, it doesn't increase the overhead at all, but it gives you more of a direction that you're going to be going at the beginning. Now, the last point here, you get these towers, or these labs, essentially, if you will. And at the top here, you can see the slots where you're putting the towers themselves, of the tops of the towers. And those are the options that you have as potential part of the game in terms of what your workers can do when you take that action at that lab. You can utilize the number of workers there to equal whatever these may give you. There are level 1s, there are level 2s, there are level 3s, and they're all different shapes. And it's a little bit of a mixed bag, haha, as I'm holding the bag itself. Because some of these, I found, are distinctly somewhat more useful. Especially given your strategies that I just mentioned, with the other aspects of the cards in the tableau that you're building, from the draws, as well as from your own personal objectives. And it's a random draw for these. And the benefit, the mitigation on this end of things as well, is that if you are behind, when somebody crosses, a la Quacks of Quedlinburg, if you will, you count back how many rat tails are in between you and the leader, and you get that many little catch up. Well, in this case, when you have the scoreboard, at each of these little squares with the numbered marker, the little symbol, there is an upgrade token. And when you cross one of those as the leader, somebody else gets to go get one of these. Whatever level they want, and put it in any of the slots in any of the towers that they choose. So do you go big and risk them catching up? Do you put it somewhere that behooves you a little bit more than them? And it plays well at all counts. As a side note, I played solo, played 2-player. So the lower player counts are very interesting, because what you do is you put out extra workers. Workers that are not being used by that faction. And it creates workers, because as you can see at the top of these towers, they have the number of workers needed to activate that in an area. And they count for this, but they don't have any dice on the top of them to give you resources for the other phase. So it's an interesting dynamic, because they're also holding up very valuable spots on the towers that are going to limit a little bit and create not such an open, I get whatever I want, whenever I want, wherever I want, that too many times worker placement fans disdain or do not enjoy when they're looking for something crunchier or tight, whatever that means. But at least in my limited playthrough, some of them were just routinely more valuable for me. Again, probably because I'm not very good at these games, but just something I wonder about play after play. At the same time, if one is routinely more powerful, right? Well, not like you can't take full advantage of it just as long as somebody else does either. So it's not limited when you're using these actions, because you're using your scientist, not your minions, and the limited spots from the minions going around as well. So is it a concern? Kinda, but also not really. So who's going to like this game? If you are, like I said, a classic worker placement no luck, strategic gameplay person only, you're not going to like this game. If you are not a fan of the dice resource, of the lesser strategic nature of having to roll dice and then using the mitigation of being able to put them where they go in combination with the larger hand size, I mean, this is not going to be a game for you. However, it does dice worker placement. I think that is, relativistically different than what's out there. And as a non-worker placement person, if you were to introduce this to me, I have no problem understanding it. Now, it is going to be a step up from worker placement games in general, not because of the actual mechanisms, but because only having the 3 resources and having the 3 types of cards and only being able to take a select amount of tokens each time, placing your workers, although it seems very non-specific at the beginning, as you play through, it really, really starts to become noticeable about better worker placement places rather than just the iconography that's on the board of giving you the bonuses. The placement of those dice strategically of the minions on the right tower versus the different tower, and when you are going to take a minion off because you can see someone else is going to utilize that resource that is now 2 instead of 1 potentially because you rolled a really good die. When can you take that off versus, again, stopping them versus helping you? Because there's not really take that. The interactivity is limited by the worker spaces that are available on the tower as 3. So if you're looking for something that has take that, go look elsewhere. If you are okay with the randomness and only the limited spacing, but still not too limited, especially at the lower player counts, you'll like this. The dice going from pool to pool, of having to have the dice to be able to recycle them each time, again, adds an interesting mechanic that the dice just don't automatically reset to you at the end of the round because there really aren't rounds like that specifically. The last aspect is if you like Tableau, this is going to be good. But also the Tableau was in combination with the draw probably one of the more frustrating things is if you just don't get things that work well with your Tableau and what you're doing with your Tableau, you might not be able to mitigate that as much as somebody else who is getting their draw despite being able to hold, 6 or 7 cards in your hand to begin with. So, again, is that going to make you frustrated? Or is that going to provide you and look at it from that side of things as an additional challenge that you're going to have to tactically chew through as another obstacle and way to outplay your opponent? And that's on you. So what do I think? Final thoughts. I wasn't sure what to think of this originally. When I first got it, I was a little bit trepidatious. Like I said, not a worker placement person in general. But it flowed very nicely. And after speaking with John, one of the designers, there is a faster playthrough, which I think is probably one of the things that I would otherwise have been a slightly more critical of, because having to buy and pay and combo and resource management for 12 cards to get your Tableau up to 12 is sometimes, I would feel, potentially going to overstay its welcome with people. And to be able to modify that and go down to 9, then you're looking under an hour and a half probably from, a easy learning game as well at a lower player count. That was really one of the things that stood out to me playing the first game with 2 players. Otherwise, it's solid. And it's different when you always are constantly either taking a guy off and using the action and losing that resource for that turn to be able to use for your scientist to create the cards in the first place, or choosing very specifically where to put them down, whether or not you're going to get the tower action, you're going to get the tower end action from the worker side of things, or you're looking for the actual lab icon to build that color card. So there's enough going on, but at no point did I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, or oh my gosh, I'm analysis paralysis, even as a non-worker placement person. Now, I'm not very good at it, so, that definitely, was realized very quickly. but it's a nice sort of puzzle without making you think or burn too much. So if you wanted something that was a little bit lighter on the worker placement side of things, but don't be fooled, this is not Champions of Midgard or, you know, that light either. This is definitely a next step up. And so if you're looking for something that is, you know, 1 or 2 rungs above that and a shorter player time of not like 2, 3, 4 hours, this fits nicely. Do you need the miniatures? No, I mean, you could do it with just dice. The plastic is probably, again, as a worker placement, not something you need. But it's a nice aesthetic on the towers themselves. And the scientists are massive compared to the minions. So, I mean, you can see the size difference here. So, I mean, there's no question about the aesthetic. But I think you'd be fine as well if you just had the dice and you didn't have these little minion guys to put it on. You just put them over the windows of the tower and it'd work just as good too. So, there you go. And you know what? Side note, I kind of just want this HP Lovkins, this Cthulhu cat. That's, when I noticed this game after it relaunched, that was the first thing that caught my eye because I'm a cat person. So, you know, it's pretty freaking cool looking actually. So, tempted just to get that thing. Or as an add-on, right? There you go. So that's it. That's all I got. If you've got questions, you got comments, you want to know some firsthand thoughts after having played it now, let me know in the comment section below. Happy to answer whatever I can. But the designers have been really responsive, so I would imagine that if you have questions, really, just go over to the Kickstarter page too. I'm sure they'd be able to help you out much quicker and better than I could. So, there you go. Thanks for watching. Stay classy. Have a great day. See you around. I mean, yeah, that Cthulhu cat, I mean, it's just kind of cool. I kind of want to, like, get it for my 1-year-old, so, like, we're trying to get him to bond with some of his stuffed animals. You know, like, kids carry around the stuffed animal or blanket or whatever until they're, like, you know, older. And my older kids will both have 1 or 2, or, you know, the middle child has, like, 6. But, like, I just think it would be really funny if that was, like, the one he bonded with, this little cat Cthulhu, and, like, people see him holding it, and they're like, oh, that's cute! And then, like, they see the whole thing, and they're like, I don't know, that's just me. That's where my mind goes. That's why you watch to the ends of the video, because then I put out stuff like this. It'd work just good too.